Dalam kalangan manusia ada insan yang seakan-akan terpilih untuk memikul tanggungjawab membaiki umat. Mudah-mudahan kamulah insan itu, Kilau.
We will continue to pressure them until they give their lands to us.
Do not forget, East Coast is our new mission.
Orang-orang British dah mula tunjuk pedang. Tanah Melayu dalam bahaya.
Apa yang telah kau lakukan pada tanah kami telah melanggar kedaulatan undang-undang orang Melayu dan juga mencabar Sultan.
Penjajah Inggris ke barat dan segala tali barut harus diperang habis-habisan. Bersumpahlah seutuhnya.
Biar aku gugur pertahankan hak daripada melihat tanah air aku dilapah penjajah.
Bumi tanah Pahang ini adalah bumi yang berdaulat. Salahkan bangsa kita sendiri kerana memberi ruang kepada mereka untuk jajah tanah kita ni.
Lihat dan saksikan kebangkitan anak Melayu. Raja Agung! Mat Kilau!
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good afternoon to everybody. Just want to test, can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Thank you. Hello again everybody, my name is Azrin Arifin, Senior Lecturer in the School of Media and Communication, Taylor's University. So welcome to the school, welcome to Taylor's. And I also would like to welcome our guest speaker for today, our Adjunct Professor Hassan Muthalib. You're there, Pak Hassan? Waiting for Pak Hassan.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear?
Yes, but we can't see you though. Can you turn on your video?
Okay. You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, I'll try. right. Hang on. Okay, can you try again?
Okay, I'll start. All right.
Okay, there you are. Right. So welcome, Pak Hassan. And also, I would like to congratulate you for your appointment as our newest adjunct professor at Taylor's University. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And also, on behalf of the university, on behalf of the school, I would like to extend our appreciation to you deeply for being here with us today. It's such an honor to have you on board, Pak Hassan.
Yes, pleasure.
Okay, so before we begin our topic, our discussion for today, there are many people here. Most of them, for your information, Pak Hassan, they are my students in the film studies class, also known as audience studies, and also students within Taylor's Universities, Taylor's University from other modules across the university. And also we have guests from outside as well, from other universities and from other countries as well, I believe. So now let's do an introduction of Pak Hassan, although he needs no introduction actually. So let me share my screen. Okay, so Pak Hassan, as he is known, he prefers to be known as Pak Hassan simply, is entirely self-taught and has had a career spanning more than half a century, beginning in 1964 in the private sector. Today, he is recognized as the father of Malaysian animation, an Asian animation pioneer, and was awarded an honorary master's by UiTM. He began as a commercial artist and window displayman, and was also into professional still photography and shooting films on Super 8mm. He then joined Film Negara, or National Film, as a graphics designer, where he had the opportunity to go into 60mm and 35mm cinematography and visual effects. He soon became known for his animation work, including the Sang Kancil or Mouse Deer series, which were popular and are still popular today on social media. In between, he animated TV commercials for many popular brands for screening in many countries. He became the first to animate characters for the cinema, as well as directing Malaysia's first animated feature, Silat Legenda, or Legendary Silat Warriors. His foray into live action directing resulted in a jury award in Jakarta for his first documentary. He has also had some acting experience in feature films, TV dramas, documentaries, a music video, and many short films. He has been invited to lecture and present many papers on film and animation, and has been on international film festival juries in Malaysia and overseas. Many of his papers and articles have been published in academic journals in Malaysia and internationally. He has reached Malaysian Cinema and has authored 3 books. His next book is on the history of Film Negara, the first studio in Kuala Lumpur. So that's our introduction on Pak Hassan. And I would also like to add that this is rather nostalgic for me, because he was also my lecturer about 30 years ago when I first studied filmmaking at Academy Film Malaysia. Isn't that right, Pak Hassan?
Yeah.
You've had many students. So now we want to go into the topic. Let me share another screen. Done. Okay. So, Pak Hassan, to begin with, our topic today is about the film Mat Kilau, that created waves, you know. But before that, within Malaysia, I'd like to ask, do we really have a cinema, Pak Hassan?
Okay, before I answer that, how do I clear the screen of the slide? Because I need to look at some notes.
How do you clear the screen of the slides?
Or minimize
I think you
it.
Exit full screen, Pak Hassan.
Full screen.
Exit full screen. Should be at the top right.
It says view.
Yeah, view. Exit full screen.
Okay.
Yes.
I learned something today.
Is it working?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So do we really have a cinema, Pak Hassan, in Malaysia? Is there such thing as Malaysian cinema?
Okay. Let me quote our very esteemed filmmaker Uwe Haji Syari. He said something that actually had all of us laughing, which was, in Malaysian cinema, there is no cinema. So what do you make of that? And he also said that there is no film without a script.
Sorry, Pak Hassan, hang on. We have an interference, audio interference. I'm just trying to mute participant. I can find who the person is. If you are somebody here. Okay, carry on, Pak Hassan. You were saying?
So he said something very strange to us. In Malaysian cinema, there is no cinema.
Okay.
So I don't know what to make of that. And he also said that there is no film without a script. But the script is not the film, which means that what a director does with the script raises it to something that is beyond what the writer intended. This is something for us to mull about because in the context of today's discussion.
Yeah, but just to interject there, Pak Hassan, the definition of cinema itself, perhaps for those who don't know, is it the cinema theatre? Is that what we mean when we say Malaysian cinema?
Of course, when we say cinema, people immediately think of a building where films are screened. It actually has, like the term cinema, film, and movies are sometimes used interchangeably. Basically, cinema encompasses everything. The films produced, the filmmakers, producers, exhibitors, all the creative and technical personnel, and also film critics. But specifically, it is about the cinematic representation of a people, their country, and their civilization on screen in the manner of films made by such directors as Federico Fellini, Ingmar Bergman, Satyajit Ray, Majid Majidi, Kenji Mizoguchi, and our own Uwe Hajishari. So, so film, aside from its physical nature, may come from artisans and authors, but movies are films that are empty of meaning. It's only pure entertainment. Okay,
thank you for shedding some light there, Pak Hassan. So I hope the definition of cinema is clear there. So let's begin with our topic. The film Mat Kilau by the director Syamsul Yusof. Recently, I think it just ended screening in Malaysia about a month ago. It achieved a very unprecedented success at the local box office with close to 100 million ringgit. I think it's 97 million ringgit. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Yes.
Pak Hassan, but it's the highest ever since in the history of cinema in Malaysia, including international films, including Hollywood films. Is it not true, Pak Hassan?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So since the film calls upon unity, albeit to a specific community, the Malay people, but such films with themes of unity, patriotism, or love for the nation have never resonated that much with the public in Malaysia before. So very briefly, could you give some background to Malaysian cinema for our audience here that have dealt with such themes before, but perhaps not as successful as Mat Kilau?
Okay, I've prepared some slides to make it a bit easier for people, even from outside the country, to understand who and what happened in the early days. Yeah? So the Malaysia and Singapore have a shared cinema history when both countries were part of British Malaya. And the earliest films to be made in Singapore were a Chinese language film and a Malay language film. Both were aimed at entertaining audiences only, without anything to say and so on. Second slide. And the earliest film entrepreneurs were Chinese. The Shaw brothers were from Hong Kong, while the others were from Singapore. And they brought in directors from 4 Asian countries. So you can see these are some of the faces, and some of them were in Singapore for quite some time before they were replaced by the locals. And the earliest films with patriotic themes were these 2 films, The Call to Independence and Sergeant Hassan. And fast forward to the 1980s with the contemporary filmmakers. So in a post-independent nation, Malaysia achieved independence in 1957. So serious themes began to appear about the nation and the people beginning somewhere around 1983. And these were new directors who actually had training either in film, theatre, or the arts. And Dato' Rahim Razali, in the picture there, he began the shift with the film called Abang, or Big Brother. And the third film that he did was The Death of a Patriot. And this was about treachery in politics. And then in the next film, Sufi Sofia, it was about Malay Muslims fighting against each other over religious issues. So 40 years later, we see the same thing that initiated and led to the making of Mat Kilau, which is treachery among the Malays themselves. And then the element of religion comes into the picture. And there's a so-called fight against the colonialists at the time. So in the 1990s, more new directors appeared on the scene. And now we began to see dissatisfaction with the leadership of Malaysia, and a lot of other things also came into the picture. And In the millennium, the digital era heralded the coming of directors from a wide strata of Malaysian society. So now we had non-Malays coming in, like Indians and Chinese making Malay films and so on. And a lot of films that were cheaply done did make a lot of money. And this time, this new generation of Malaysians also questioned the status quo that was existing. And this generation called for unity among Malaysians. So Mat Khalid was quite prominent, but he was so subtle in what he was saying that people did not really catch that he was actually talking about the Malays, that you are losing your culture, you are losing your identity, and you have become capitalist, you have to get back on track. But it was very, very subtle. And we can see he had not only Malays in the lead role, but also Chinese and even Indians. This was to show for him that they are not only people in Malaysia, but they are also people who go to the cinema. So he was actually widening his market, and he was asking for all strata of society to work together to build the nation. And other directors started to explore and promote issues of togetherness, brotherhood, and sacrificing for the nation. But it was totally unlike the approach taken by Syamsul Yusof in his film Mat Kilau. And 2022 is actually a very unusual year. And in August, we celebrated our independence from British colonial rule. And in this month, on the 16th, Malaysia was formed together with two other countries, Sabah and Sarawak. So 3 films had patriotic themes or promoted Malaysians as a family. However, Mat Kilau was aimed at only one community. And unfortunately, it was denigrating the other communities in its interpretation. And this is what we will explore after this.
Okay, thank you, Pak Hassan. A very blunt, I would say, opinion, but I believe one is entitled to his or her own opinion. So from what we can understand, based on what you have just presented, we actually have a long history in cinema that dated almost the same time when cinema was invented in the West. Yeah, Pak Hassan?
Yeah.
And Mat Kilau isn't the first film to be going into this patriotic theme.
Actually, there are other films before this. Some of them were funded by the government through FINAS.
Yeah.
So somehow or other, they did not resonate. And we can analyze them and say that, well, probably the narrative was not properly structured. And if you look at, if you compare with Indonesian and films from India, you can see how strong they are in with the patriotic themes. And this is what we are lacking. So in Indonesia, Hanung Bramantyo is in the forefront with the films that he's doing with patriotic themes. And what is different from Indonesia and other countries is that they show one person in the foreground who is involved in fighting against injustice, fighting for the country, and so on. But other people, even the common man, also is coming into the picture. And at the end of the film, we come to the conclusion that actually all Indonesians are heroes, no matter in what capacity that they are performing their duties, whether as a servant, whether as a driver, and so on. So this is what makes Indonesian cinema very different. And I remember Joko Anwar, who did a film called Gundala. It was supposed to be about a superhero, but he is actually not a superhero. He is too soft. But then we see the other people coming in to help him, and he also, it looks like, also taking the same stance as the other directors, that everyone is a superhero. This is quite clever.
Yeah. So what you mentioned just now, Cik Hassan, I believe you're referring to representations in cinema, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I remember just recently, it was just last month, that we also had a webinar with another adjunct professor of ours who is also a renowned filmmaker, Dain Syed. And the topic of discussion was about representations in cinema. And he said that his belief is that being a filmmaker, but he did say that is his belief. He's not imposing on others, but he did say that he believes as a filmmaker, one has to make a fair or a just representation of the society that he represents. So are you then saying that through the film Mat Kilau, it is not giving a fair representation of the people of Malaysia in the film?
Yes. See, if someone has limited knowledge, what we will see in his film is something that does not go very far. But a person who is a reader, who watches a lot of movies, and he's a traveler, and he mixes with all kinds of people, and he's a thinker, you will begin to see something very different. So this is why in world cinema, we find that there are only very few directors who are constantly talked about or referred to. So if you take Mat Kilau, at the beginning of Mat Kilau, I must say that Syamsul did something very appropriate, which is he gave a disclaimer that this film is fiction. But unfortunately, because the name Mat Kilau is so well known that he was a fighter, he was a warrior, and then there were things that happened in Pahang, where he came from, that is already in the public knowledge. So that creates a bit of a problem. But I must say that the fact that film is fiction is not well understood among some filmmakers and the public. That any historical event, when transferred to the screen, automatically becomes fiction.
Yeah. Because
it has to follow certain narrative conventions like plot point, dramatic irony, recognition and reversal, just to name a few. So cinematic representation is very important for a filmmaker to understand that what can he show, we call that selectivity, and what is it that he has to leave out, which we call ellipsis. So he must be working closely together with the scriptwriter, as famous filmmakers like Ozu and Kurosawa worked with a writer so that they can get what they want on the screen, the way they are going to represent it onto the screen. Now, local films with patriotic themes have failed to take all these elements into account. Another aspect is the lack of understanding of the language of cinema. That some aspects of story need to be presented through indexes and symbols rather than just through dialogue and acting. So this is what cinema is all about. And I must give examples like films like Bukit Kepong and Lieutenant Adnan, which fail to evoke the image of the hero on screen as was intended by the producers. Instead, they were actually demeaned. At the end of Bukit Kepong, the faces of the policemen who died in the attack on the police station are superimposed on the burning police station. And what does it signify? That they are actually in hell. So that defeats the purpose of the whole film. This is why you need to be trained in film and not just in film production. So this is where 95% of Malaysia's filmmakers are making a mistake. Now in Lieutenant Adnan, the lieutenant is mobbed by Japanese soldiers and he appears to be bayoneted to death. We don't see him, but we can sense that. As such, Lieutenant Adnan does not die heroically as was intended by the producers. So the objective of making the film gets lost. But if you look at Fist of Fury, Bruce Lee was acting in it. Yeah. In the film, Bruce Lee, at the end of the film, he dies by being shot. But he dies a heroic death and he is in action. So what he does is, he does a flying kick. The scene freezes. We don't see any bullet striking him. We only hear the gunshots. but the image of him as a hero who sacrifices himself becomes etched in our minds. So this is the kind of representation that is lacking in our films.
Okay.
And in the films, The Gladiator, Braveheart, and Road to Perdition, we find the heroes die at the end of the film, but their image as heroes remains strong in our minds because it was set up in a certain manner.
Yeah.
Now, in Ola Bola, directed by Chiu Keng-guan a couple of years ago, it was about the football match.
Yes.
The final scene of our victorious footballers is represented in such a way that the audience also joins in their victory run. It is a victory for the nation and for everyone. It was a very inspiring film and we felt all of us were really Malaysian. And for me, this is the best film so far with a patriotic theme that has been done in Malaysia. But you also probably would like to know, can young filmmakers use Mat Kilau as a model?
Yeah.
I would say yes, but only in terms of its production techniques and excellent marketing strategies, but certainly not in terms of story, narrative, and stylistics.
Yeah.
Stylistics.
Yeah. Sorry, Cik Hassan. Based on what you are explaining, I just noticed that there is a question there in the chat, right? That is perhaps relevant to what you're explaining, and I would just like to read it out for you. Okay. It's from Honor 8X. Okay. The question is, based on what you're saying. So the question is, so what is the ethics of making film based on real person? Mat Kilau is a real person with real life. This Mat Kilau is a fictional film with elements of real person and real events. So the key question there is, what are the ethics in making films based on real people?
Okay. The second part of the question, I will be saying something about it later.
Yeah.
And going more into detail.
Yeah.
When you talk about ethics, now, if the filmmaker is someone who is intelligent, he is well-read, he knows about world cinema and so on, he will know how to present his subject. For instance, we find that some filmmakers will definitely include sex, violence, and so on. But if you look at the films of from Japan, especially their masters like Ozu, Mizoguchi, Kobayashi had Samurai Fight, and Yoji Yamada, my favorite director, you find that they have a very high ethical and moral standing in them. And they know what to put in and what not to put in. Because they know that once you start to make a comment visually, either through the violence or whatever, it's like you're saying that, hey, I'm a good guy, but look at these people. That means you are criticizing people. In cinema, you do not criticize people. You just tell a story. So look at Majid Majidi, the Iranian filmmaker, how he makes his stories. It's about children. Why does he like children so much? Because it's like what Jesus Christ said, "Come unto me, little children, for it is such that will enter the kingdom of God." That means if an adult, his heart, his thinking is childlike. So these are the kind of people who will enter heaven ultimately. But today's world, we cannot find these people anymore. So the function of a filmmaker is to draw people back to the right road, not to teach, not to or whatever. It's just tell the story, but within that story, all these elements will be there.
Yeah. Again, based on what you've just said, I remember that forum that you were in that was organized by Finas, where sat next to you was Datuk Yusof Haslam himself, who in his career achieved most of the box office hits in Malaysia, and Syamsul Yusof happens to be his own son, right? And he said that the film was well received by the people in Malaysia, like never before. So there must be something in there that made the audience in Malaysia received the film Mat Kilau so well, despite whatever that you have just mentioned. So my question is, what do you think made the Malaysian audience receive the film so well?
Now, even Hollywood does not know what films will sell.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows exactly what the audience wants until they say it on the screen. So there are films that are very mediocre, maybe some even really, really bad, but they resonate with a certain segment of the audience. So I can see that some of the producers in Malaysia, among them, formerly it was David Teo with Metrowell,
Yeah.
and then Professor Razak Moidin with his brother's company. They made film that actually made a lot of money, but I would find them problematic. Why? Because they are not films. They are movies. They do not have subtext. So you see, a film has got text and subtext. Subtext is actually the story that the filmmaker wants to tell. Text is what we see, but there has got to be something that is behind the story that will make us feel something. So this is what is lacking in the majority of Malaysian films. So if the film succeeds, it does not necessarily mean it's a good film. And if a good film, very well made, does not succeed, it does not mean it's a bad film. So there are so many films made around the world by master filmmakers that fail. So are we saying that those filmmakers do not know what they are doing?
Yeah. So are you in a way also stating the point that the success of a film should not be measured only based on the box office hits?
Okay, yes, of course. But I must stress that the best film in the world cannot be sold. It is promotion and marketing that sells the film. So the work of the director is to make the film. The work of the producer is to sell the film. Now, when Hollywood makes a film, if in the first weekend it doesn't make a certain amount of money, they know it's not going to make it at all, and then it will go direct to DVD. This is why when they make a film, they already promote it while the film is being made, sometimes even before the film is being made. There's a lot of hype. And then once the film is made, they will spend millions and millions of US dollars to promote the film. And if it still doesn't make it at the box office, that means it's too bad. Now, I'm sure you remember the film called Love Story in the 1970s.
Yes.
Hollywood was on the way down. And suddenly this soppy love story film hit the market like nobody's business.
Yeah.
Now, nobody knows what, maybe there's something in society, a kind of feeling or whatever, that affects many people. So nobody knows, okay? Nobody knows anything.
Yes. Like I always say to my students, myself, even Michael Jackson, well, this is in music, when he did his albums, he himself didn't know how well it's going to sell. So perhaps we can say the same thing about films as well. But at the same time, Pak Hassan, in Malaysia, always, when you read reviews and when you read news articles on Malaysian films, we seem to always regard films as entertainment. So are films just entertainment, or what is this whole business about film being entertainment, Pak Hassan?
If you go to Europe and you watch a movie, you'll find, even though there are not many people, but the people sit until after the last credit title rolls away. Unfortunately, in Malaysia, once the light comes, once the music builds up, they are all leaving the theater, and then what happens at the end of the credits? We have another scene.
No,
like
do you know why, Pak Hassan? Because even before the credit can roll, the workers from the cinema already standing down there and opening the doors. Right. So are they actually telling us, please leave? So
we don't have a culture of watching films, appreciating films, and so on. But of course, I admit that there are a certain group of people who will go for all these very, cheaply made films, soppy love stories, and just action movies like Mat gangsters, and so on. There is a market for this. We cannot deny producers from making all these films. But will it help to develop the cinema industry? Of course, when they make money, like Mat Kilau has made 97 million, and the producer will keep on making, so that's one good thing. And people will have jobs, and the cinema will make money, and down the line, there's a lot of things that's going to happen economically. But on the other hand, we also need a higher level of filmmaking, where there are some serious films, but I would strongly say, I would strongly support the late Yasmin Ahmad, who said, make films that are personal, but also engaging at the same time. If you don't engage your audience, so what do you do with your film? You and your friends only watch it? So that's a question you need to ask. Just like in novels, you have popular novels, then you have the higher level novels, and then you have academic writings and so on. So for every one of that, there is an audience. But the Prophet Muhammad said, speak to people according to their level of understanding. So he was actually talking about target audience. So once you want to make a film, you better be sure who are your target audience. And you got to ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, you ask yourself, why must this film be made? What is so wonderful about your story that it has to be made and people will go to see? Okay, number 2, you have to ask yourself, do you have the right team to make the film? Because if you don't have people who can really work together with you, it's also going to be pointless. And number 3, how are you going to get the audience into the cinema? So that's where the marketing, the promotion, and comes into the picture. So you see, there are a lot of things to consider before you decide to make a film.
So several things there, Pak Hassan. Sorry, this is not really scripted, but I get excited, and I think this is more natural, Pak Hassan. But I will not go totally off track. I will come back, to how we plan. But I picked up several things there, Pak Hassan. Number 1, you did mention that, and I got the feeling that probably there's something wrong with our own culture in Malaysia, because you did mention that probably we do not know how to really appreciate cinema. Like you give an example of how people watch films in Europe, that they wait until the very last credit, at the end of the film. But if that is true, then we've had a long tradition of cinema in Malaysia that we share with Singapore. And you gave a brief presentation of it as well. So we also have the golden age of Malay cinema during the time of P. Ramlee. So were we not, meaning the Malaysian audience, were we not appreciative of our cinema then, Pak Hassan?
Well, actually in Singapore, they were starved for entertainment. So they had Wayang Kulit, Bangsawan, Sandiwara in the 1950s. And gradually, when films came along, this all died. So I was told by Hamzah Hussain, who was the executive producer, associate producer in Cathay Chris in Singapore. He said that going to the cinemas was like going to some kind of like going to the fun fair together with the family, the mother-in-law in hand, and so on. And after watching the film, they will go by the roadside and have a satay and go home. This is basically how it happened in the villages, where after the harvesting of the rice by everybody in the village, then there will be a big feast. Then there will be the Wayang Kulit show,
the shadow play.
Then everybody will go home and sleep it off. So at that time, there were many people who didn't even know how to read or write. So of course we cannot blame them. But if you look at Malay culture, the Penglipo Lara, the storytellers of ancient days, and the people who were involved in the traditional performing arts, many of them were unlettered. But look at their performances. And for those who could read and write, you can see the poems, the saja, and all the other quatrains and so on that they compose, the Syair. Today, if you look at it, it's the rhythm, the meter, and whatever, all is exactly like what you are studying in the universities today. And Professor Muhammad Haji Saleh has written 2 books which I would definitely recommend to everyone in the film industry to read, and it's both in Malay as well as in English. One is called The Mind of the Malay Author, and the other one is The Poetics of Malay Literature, where he explores all of this. And this should be the foundation for all film students, including those from other countries. You should go and look at your own traditional performing arts, like Iran and Turkey. Their cinema's roots are from your traditional village theater and storytellers of ancient days. It's thousands of years.
Yes.
So because of that civilization of being thousands of years old, the storytelling is really powerful. Malaysia, we have a problem because ours is only about a few hundred years, and then there's a mix with the Chinese, Indian, and so on, because we are at the crossroads of people traveling. And the people who came, migrated here, the Malays, the Chinese, and the Indians, they were from the working class. They came here looking for food and shelter and something for the next generation. They were not thinkers. Philosophers will never leave their country, no matter how their works are banned or they're censored and so on. They will never leave their country. So this is something that we have to consider.
Yeah. Okay, going back to Mat Kilau, Pak Hassan, you mentioned just now that there are 2 things that we can learn, especially filmmakers, from Mat Kilau, despite your views on the content of Mat Kilau. You mentioned that one is on the technical aspects and one is on the marketing. Can you elaborate more on the technical aspects, Pak Hassan?
Okay, so if you look at the way Mat Kilau is structured, you can see the shots are, I would say, appropriate, maybe not correct, because sometimes his film grammar is out. Film grammar is about long shot, medium shot, close up, and you take it like close up has got to be either like this or maybe like this, and not halfway there, halfway here. Like medium shot, we call it sometimes a waist shot. It's just slightly below the waist. Now, those are the rules that you have to follow. And unfortunately, he breaks it without understanding. Why? Because most of his films are copies, and he copies from the stylistics from films from Hollywood and so on. So that's a problem. And he will not be able to go further than what he is doing now. Now, the other thing is, the photography, I can say, is very acceptable, and he uses a lot of long lens, telephoto lens, where the background goes out of focus, and this draws your attention to the face of the character, and sometimes he has the character looking into the camera, so we are very clear as to who they are, but he doesn't understand that he has got to do the opposite for the bad guys, that he cannot also take them from the front, because then there is a similarity. And this goes against the Gestalt principles of perception, where, and also in the binary contrast between 2 characters, if you take the good guy from the front, the bad guy must be taken from the back before you come to the front. He doesn't understand all of this. So the film language doesn't develop there. But I would say that to an untrained person, it will be satisfying, but not to someone who understands what is cinematography. And the editing is very fast. It builds up. It gives you an adrenaline rush. Okay, so you sit and keep watching, and then he builds up the sound too much, and he does it purposely. And I remember his father saying that the father had already advised against it, but he didn't care.
Yeah.
So on the production side, he knows production. Okay, he's done so many films, and there's no problem. And only thing is, he doesn't understand what is film. Only film production.
Okay, I picked up one point you mentioned there, Pak Hassan, that you mentioned this rule in filmmaking. Okay, so most students who go to film school would learn these rules. These are basics in film production. But I remember Syamsul himself mentioned when asked by the journalist, and it came out in the news. You know, I was reading it, and he said that he admitted that he broke rules in making Mat Kilau, but he says that it's okay. And if I'm not mistaken, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, he even quoted P. Ramlee. And he said that I'm just being like P. Ramlee, you know, following the heart. What do you have to say about that, Pak Hassan? About breaking the rule?
Okay, I hope you don't hear me laughing.
Okay.
See, when you are in school, you learn the rules, especially if you're doing diploma. And if I'm a lecturer, I can only evaluate you to know whether you know the rules, if you follow the rules, and that is for diploma level. Okay, it's after the diploma level, when you go into degrees, now you can break the rule because you already know it. And in cinematography, the first exercise that they normally give you is about the understanding of the line.
Yes,
and then line. Yes, the line of axis, the stage line, the line of action, the line, all kind of 180-degree rule, and so on.
Yes.
So, and even in animation, that's what we teach. Because when you do storyboarding, you cannot make a mistake. And you make mistakes sometimes without realizing it.
Yes.
So we have an exercise in animation where you do your storyboard, you understand about this setting the line and crossing the line, and then you do a video. And then from there, we know whether you have understood it or not. But sometimes they still make mistakes. So now the thing is, first you know the rules, then you break the rules, but do not forget to come back to the rule. That is the rule. So I'm sorry to say that Syamsul breaks the rules for no reason. Okay, you break the rule because you have a reason. Let me give you an example. If suddenly you take a shot of a person's eyes only, that's breaking the rule, especially if the person is the hero, because you don't do that to the hero. And if you make the person's face suddenly dark one side, when actually you need to light from the front, but you break the rule for a reason. And in casting, once you choose your character, the look of the character, once he appears on screen, we can immediately form an opinion about that person. This is why casting is very important, and all those classic directors will never shoot if they don't get the right person. Because 50% of the battle is won because the audience already understands that. So I'm sorry to say that the breaking of the rule is only when you know the rule, not just knowing the rule, but understanding why you're doing it.
Yeah, talking about this, Pak Hassan, it reminds me of one of those great directors from Japan that you mentioned, Ozu, Yasujiro Ozu, in his famous film Tokyo Story. People always write about this and people always talk about this even until today, right? That he went, talking about the line, the axis line, the 180-degree rule, he totally broke it and went 360-degree, very much against what Hollywood is practicing. But then the West, you know, Hollywood coming from the West could still accept that, and suddenly he becomes like a new innovator in cinema. What do you have to say about that? That is breaking the rule to the extreme.
Yeah, actually, he was already doing it in the 1930s, long before Hollywood discovered Japanese cinema in 1958 through Rashomon. So it was then only they began to look at him in a different way. But his way of crossing the line is very unusual. You will notice that his characters, if two of them are talking, normally they're looking in the same direction.
Yeah.
This is the Asian way, or maybe the Japanese way, that to depict that visually you get the impression that these two people are in agreement. So they don't have to quarrel and so on. They speak very softly. There is no raising of the voice and so on. as in the Throne of Blood. You see, we have to look at Western culture as opposed to the Eastern culture. Now, in Shakespeare's Macbeth, you have Macbeth's wife yelling at Macbeth, "Why can't you kill the king?" Blah, 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 and so on. But when Kurosawa took it over, how did the wife speak? According to Japanese culture, she doesn't raise her voice. She just stands there like a rock, and then looks at him, and she just softly asks him, "Why can't you kill the king?" Which is more sinister and more evil.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it fits with their culture. So I think that's why A Throne of Blood has been accepted, almost like a Japanese story.
Yeah.
So you see, there are. That's why I say one has got to be a thinker by watching other films, and Piramli did that. Piramli copied from everywhere, from Raj Kapoor's film, from Charlie Chaplin's films, from Elia Kazan's films, which he saw in Japan, and even saw Rashomon, and he stole many ideas from there. Even in his first film, Penarik Beca, when the Haji is being driven in the rickshaw, in the trishaw, there's a tracking shot of the trees, the treetops, and the music is actually from Rashomon, where the woodcutter is walking through the jungle, and the music goes tom 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 tom. And later you find in Semera Padi, there's another one that was copied, but it was so innovatively presented.
Yeah. So I picked up one point there, Pak Hassan, when you referred to what Ozu did, which is totally the opposite of Hollywood, the West. About two people talking, about two characters having conversation with each other. So in a typical mainstream Hollywood film, it would be a two-shot, cut, back and forth. But then you said that Ozu likes to have both characters looking in the same direction, and you said that it is a representation of the Japanese culture, of the Eastern culture. So they bring it in. So going back to Mat Kilau, do you see Mat Kilau himself, a Malay and a real life historical icon who fought against the occupation of the British in Pahang at the time? So then perhaps the film has got to be true to the culture of the Malays. So the question is, did you see a true representation of the Malay culture in cinematic forms in Mat Kilau?
So if you look at many of the writings of various researchers, you'll find that Malay culture is very refined. And being set in about more than 100 years ago, the Malays would have been really, really very, very refined, and their good mannerisms, and they will not be speaking the way they speak in Mat Kilau. Okay, so it's like a TV drama that we watch, where they have to, when they're angry, they have to speak very loudly. So I think this is one of the reasons that Sophie Jikan, one of my former students who acted in the gangster films, I think he didn't want to act anymore, because he's a real actor. He has got talent, but he doesn't like the way the director represents his character as a gangster. But in Mama Khalid's film, Amir dan Luqman Pergi ke Laut, you'll find that he's the head of the gangsters, but look at the way he conducts himself. Why did the director do that? Because the director is a Malay, his characters are Malay, and the way Malays are portrayed on the screen create an image in the mind of the audience, especially in non-Malay audience. So if they're doing a lot of yelling, a lot of preaching, a lot of killing and beating up people and so on, so what kind of image is being built up in the mind of the audience, especially the young people?
Yeah. So when you talk about this, it brings me to one of the elements of a film, dialogues. And I remember you were talking about dialogues about Mat Kilau So in trying to connect the dialogues in Mat Kilau and the way of the Malay culture being very refined, as you mentioned just now, how do you see the dialogues in Mat Kilau? Because they were harsh statements, right? I remember a scene in particular where the lords in Pahang, they decided to finally confront the British officer in the film, okay? And they were using very strong statements like the New World Order and, you know, things like that. So what do you think about the dialogues used in Mat Kilau?
So I am very concerned at the way the dialogue is written. It is very badly written, and that is why the actors couldn't deliver their lines properly. And the actors are not your ordinary actors. They are really good actors. And I think probably they were traumatic. So let me quote some of the dialogue. I have translated it into English. As immigrants, you should know your place. So who are they talking about? So I am concerned that when you make a film, if it's a period film, but you are making it now, you are actually commenting on what is happening now. So if the purpose of Mat Kilau was to unite the Malays who are now disunited politically, that means you are saying something about what's happening now. And when you start to mention immigrants, who actually are you talking about? So I'm not surprised that the producer is a former vice president of an NGO that has been very vocal about the sovereignty of the Malays and so on and so on. And there have been fiery statements. So I'm not very surprised. Now, another example, wait for the rise of the Malays. Are they talking about another May 13? And then another one, this land belongs to our ancestors. So some people might say, so what? Now it belongs to so many people, isn't it, that have become citizens. And then Islam is my religion, my race is Malay. Why do you need to be so vocal about it? And then forget not the special rights of the Malays. You are reminding us, and where is Malay sovereignty in the eyes of the British? So all these statements are actually aimed at certain people. So you have to look at it. And then the dialogue writing is actually really bad in that it contradicts what he was saying just now. Okay? And then there's one scene where the son begs the father, promise me that you will not be a traitor. Malays are like beggars in their own country. The Malays are easily bought off. The Malays have only themselves to blame. Now, if a film is about the unity of the Malays, this is going against that. And then at the same time, you are representing visually two groups of people. One, Malays, and on the other hand, you have four people in one group. Okay? And they are being fought against by the Malays. So one is the British, the other is the Chinese, then the Sikh soldiers representing the Indians. Then you have one fellow, a native from Borneo.
Yeah.
Now, are they talking about Sabah and Sarawak? So you see, there are a few things that are hidden here, and it is aimed at particular people or particular communities.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, how did the censorship board approve this film to go on, especially in the month of
Merdeka? Yeah. So very interesting there, Pak Hassan. I hope you will not lose your train of thoughts, because I know you have a lot in your mind. But especially for the benefit of my students who are now just trying to understand film through film studies, I keep telling them that, we are just like what you mentioned just now, to read film as text, right? And that we should be analyzing film. We don't just watch film. Perhaps you watch film and enjoy it as a normal audience with the first watch, but then after that, read films. So based on what you've just mentioned just now, is that how we are supposed to read films? You went all the way to recognizing the Borneo element in Mat Kilau, the immigrant element in Mat Kilau. So is that how films are meant to be read, that you have to go really deep into what you see on the big screen?
If you ask any director, they will not tell you about all of these things. They say, no, I just want to tell a story. But in fact, it is really, really well planned out. Otherwise, the production designer cannot do his job properly, the art director cannot do his job, the cameraman cannot do his job. So all these people, the cameraman, the editor, the sound man, the production designer, they are people who know what film is all about. And therefore, they come together to help the director realize his vision on the screen. So the director, first of all, he must have an idea. All his stories move from an idea. And doesn't go into the details, but the idea must be clear in his mind. For instance, you have The Gladiator, a film that is 2 hours, 25 minutes long, fighting with tigers, fighting with gladiators, and so on and so on. But that is not the film. What is the film? There is another story hiding in the film. And we begin to see the clues given by the director, the writer, here, there, and everywhere. So let me give you the example. At the very beginning of the film, we see the camera following the hero from the back, and only his hand is shown. This is totally breaking the rule by cutting off the body, taking from the back, and he's the hero. Why does he do that? Because later we will find that in the middle of the biggest war of his life, his mind is in his village and he wants to be with his wife and son. So the music comes on, very sonorously, and it makes us feel something, but we do not know what it is. And then there is a line of dialogue when he's on his horse, looking at his soldiers, and he's telling them before they go to war, remember, man, 2 weeks from now, I will be harvesting my crops. That means his mind is already in his village. And then later we find the king calls him into the tent and he says, now that you have won all your wars, what do you want to do? I want to go home. The king says, home. Tell me about your home. And he speaks about his home as if it is right in front of him. So the film, 2 hours, 25 minutes, fighting this, fighting that. What is it all about? Nothing is more important in this world to me than my home and my wife and my son. That is why it became a great film, because the idea was so small. But we always want to go for big ideas. Your film will become very small. Now you mentioned that Syamsul is following the style of Piramli. So let me give you an example, which probably Syamsul never even saw in Piramli's film. Piramli understood what is film language. I give you an example. There's a scene where Aziz Sata in Pendekar Bujang Lapuk is squatting on the table, stealing the money of the ferry workers while the fighting is going on all around. Then the camera crosses the line for no reason, and I was thinking, why? And now we see the sky dominating in the background. In film language, once you show the sky dominating or being repeated, you are saying this scene or this film has got something to do with God or spirituality. So the answer comes once they cross the river and he's looking for the money, but there is a hole in the pocket. Now, how do we analyze this? That these three young men are going to look for the master, the Malay master, who is very sincere in imparting his knowledge, and this is the true knowledge, unlike the capitalist ferry owner who his people beat up the customers and so on. So do not bring the haram money. So that's why God created that hole in the pocket so that the money will not be brought once they go and meet the master. Now, there is no explanation in the film about this, but it is significant that once it is structured like that, A plus B plus C, you will get D. Okay, and that's how the story moves forward. Now, these are things that the students will have to figure out once they watch a movie. The first scene is the important scene. It is a capsule of the entire movie. Example, The War Horse by Steven Spielberg. Why did Spielberg have a horse giving birth in the meadow, in the wide open space, rather than in the corral? Because we see a master shot of mountains and greenery and so on, as if it was like in the ancient days, that it is primordial. This is how the world was when God created it, or something like that. Why? Later only we are going to find out that now we are in the modern world. But why is man killing men? They're killing each other in wars. So the horse represents the primordial, that we have to be, we have to have humanity within us. So that's the only way that we are going to live together as human beings.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the first shot, and the first shot is usually repeated in the last shot. So it's like two bookends, and there is also a visual rhythm once you repeat it. So these are the things that you have to look at, and you find this also in the film, recent film made by my friend Datuk Zahim Al-Bakri, called Split Gravy on Rice, where you can see this visual rhythm running throughout the film, because he is a writer, and it is a writer's film.
Yeah, it's actually an old film, Pak Hassan, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it was 2012, I think they made it.
Yeah,
but it is still relevant today. It will be relevant 20 years from now, 50 years from now.
Yeah, but it's interesting when you give an example of film language through P. Ramlee's film Pendekar Bujang Lapuk. For those who don't know, it's almost a slapstick comedy. But then you describe a scene that P. Ramlee was using film language visually. So does it mean to the students primarily, you know, does it mean that this film language, all this information and all this knowledge embedded in film, they don't have to be in serious films. Even in comedies like Pendekar Bujang Lapuk, you can find them.
Once you make a film for the cinema has got its own life. There's a certain way of presenting your stories so that people can follow. So you see, there are four disciplines that I usually speak about. One is semiotics, the other one is binary opposition, the other one is archetypes, and the other one is the 5 principles in the Gestalt psychology of perception. So this is found in mise-en-scène. Now this has not been mentioned anywhere, so you can't look it up in the books, but all those names I've mentioned, they are in either psychology, in anthropology, or some other discipline. But I found the connection. This is what Leonardo da Vinci meant when he said, everything is linked to everything else. It's up to you to find the link. So this is why you have to train yourself to be an observer. So carry a small book with you wherever you go, and anything that strikes you very unusual, note it down. The idea is not to refer to it later, but the very fact that you carried a book, a pen, and also you noted it down, does something to your brain cell. So you are actually training yourself to be more critical, to be observant, and this actually you are becoming your own guru. So it is in your hands, literally. For instance, the lines in your palm are all indications of you. The left hand is what you are born with, your potential. This is what you are doing with your potential. So I can read palms, so I can tell you whether you are succeeding or not.
It's funny, you know, because you were talking about that 30 years ago in my class when I was your student in Academy Film Malaysia, Pak Hassan. You were just talking about your hand. But now, coming back to Mat Kilau, I would like to read out. We have Mustafa here who wrote something in the chat. He says, perhaps we may need to situate the Mat Kilau film in the wider social context in order to understand why it managed to gain traction with many people, particularly the Malays. It was screened at a time when the Malay community is depicted by certain politicians as being disunited and under siege. Hence, the search for a Malay hero in these so-called trying times, who probably can be made out to be a unifying figure for the Malays as a whole. So I think the summary is, and this has been quoted a lot, especially on social media by general audience, that the Malays need a hero at this so-called pressing times.
Right.
What's your comment on that?
I agree with Mustafa, and I'm sure anthropologists, especially those who are into popular culture, will have a field day analyzing this. Now, the playwright Bertolt Brecht said something very important. He said something about the sad is the country, I'm just paraphrasing, sad is the country that needs heroes. Yeah. Why does a nation need heroes? Because it's in trouble. So I would agree with Mustafa that Mat Kilau came at a time when I think everybody is politically weary with the news coming out on social media, in the newspapers, about this group of people against that group of people. These people became treacherous, the Sheraton move, and so on. So definitely, I would say that they are looking for someone to bring them out, someone like Nelson Mandela and so on, who came and inspired many people.
Yeah, but despite everything, Pak Hassan, is it actually wrong for the Malays to make a film about? Hang on, I need to mute someone. Who's that? Okay, so what was I saying? Yeah, so is it wrong, Pak Hassan, then, for the Malays to make a film about themselves with the intention of bringing back the spirit of the Malays, to remind them of who they are? Because we also see this with other great films from other great cinemas in the world. I like to quote, films from Zhang Yimou, for instance. You mentioned Japanese cinema. We see the same thing in Iranian cinema. It's happening in the West as well. So why can't the Malays then simply make films about themselves, about their history, about the hero that they need? Although you mentioned that it has to be set now in contemporary Malaysia, where we are actually a multicultural nation. What's your thought on that?
Well, it's a free market. Everybody can do whatever they want. They can make all kinds of films, but it's very important. At a time when there's a slogan called Keluarga Malaysia, you come out with a film like this that is totally against that concept. And visually, you see the contrast of one group of people against another group of people. It is very clear. You don't need to be a professor to be able to see all of this. And on social media, I can tell you that there have been so many comments about what do you call Mat Kilau that I can quote. Here's someone who wrote, Mat Kilau is only another gangster movie from Syamsul Yusof. And then there's a reviewer called Daniel Kade who says, Mat Kilau is regressive. It does not compare favorably with even the films of the 1950s. And there's an academic who has dubbed Mat Kilau as an ethno-religious film. I agree with him. Its representations go against the government's Keluarga Malaysia, as I said, by promoting an us against them ideology. And we see this in the binary contrast of the five main characters. The Malays on one side, and on the other side are these four groups of people. And is this how we should make films today that increase the gulf that has been developing already between all Malaysians? So that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah. Okay. And I would like to pick up one more from the chat. This is from Izzah Shahdi, who's also he's a TV drama director. He's saying there, he wrote it in Malay, but I will translate as best as I can. He's saying that local directors should be skilled or equip themselves with the art of storytelling. And he's referring to oral storytelling, particularly with the knowledge of screenwriting. Because in the hands of the director, ultimately it will be pictures telling the story. So his question is to you, Pak Hassan, are our film directors not good enough? Are our directors good enough to tell stories?
Okay, good question. I remember when the film Ambon was going to be made, it was based on a script written by Rohiman Harun, who we had never heard of. but we knew his brother was an art enthusiast. He wrote the script and he won an award under FINAS competition. And I hadn't read it, but those who had read it, they said it was very well written. And it was surprising because this person, they have never heard of him before. But then what happened? So a director was assigned. And the first thing that a director did was to change the script. Now, this is unethical. And FINAS should have said, no. You just say, what is it that you want changed? And we will get the writer to do that because the writer understands the subject. So there was no rape scene, but a rape scene was added. So what happened to this writer? He withdrew from the scene, and that is our loss. So I would say there are people in the Malaysian film industry who have what it takes, but they are not being given opportunities to do. And I think one of the reasons is because the producers do not want to pay good money for these people. And of course, once it gets in the hand of the director, it becomes something altogether different. But if you look at the films of Uwe Haji Syahri, like you mentioned about the representation of Malays on screen.
Yes.
These films, you can really see Malays on the screen. The way they dress, their mannerisms, their ideology, and why do they behave in such a manner. And this is what he has been exploring. If I read rightly, from his first film to the final one, Hanyut, he's talking about the same thing. And this is what I think someone mentioned, that ultimately a film director, even though he makes many films, ultimately he actually makes one film only.
Yes.
It means it's the same issue, the same theme.
Same theme, yes.
That is playing with.
Yeah.
So that is the author. That is the author.
Yeah. It's interesting, Pak Hassan, when you quoted Uwe's first film, I remember at the time, it was early 90s when it came out, that film became so controversial. And I remember at the time, because it came out in the papers, people were still reading papers, physical newspapers, right? You had NGOs, particularly Malay NGOs, and also women Malay NGOs having seminars to lash on the film, and it became controversy because they were saying that Uwe was not depicting Malay women as how they are, how they should be on screen.
Right.
Yeah. But you are saying the opposite here.
Yeah.
Can you shed some light?
Okay. I know the film very well because I was going to be involved doing the visual effects, but then it didn't work out. I remember going to these seminars and forums.
Oh, you were there.
Yeah. And they were attacking Uwe left and right, especially the women.
Yes.
And Uwe was looking at me pleadingly not to speak up. But they were all women around us. Okay. So, but I didn't speak up in Dewan Bahasa when they were having the discussion there. So there were these three women who were complaining that Uwe degraded women in the way he presented them on the screen. I said the total opposite. I said, I'm very upset with Uwe because of the way he represented men. There's one man who's hanging on to the windowsill and asking for sex from the main character.
Yes.
What can be more terrible depiction of a man than that? And then here's a guy who only sells patai and vegetables, and you can imagine the casting aspect, the way he chose the character of Nasir Bilal Khan and the profession that he has. What kind of brain does he have? Probably he's not a thinker at all. And then once he got upset that she left him on the day of his wedding, he had only one thing in his mind. He's going to get her and he's going to sell her to the brothel in Thailand for 6 ringgit. So why 6 ringgit? It seems that Uwe actually did research and he is very unusual because his research goes very, very deep. And this is what our filmmakers don't do, most of them. He said he found out that if the human body was more or less melted down, there'll be, you know, calcium and whatever left. The value would be 6 ringgit.
Oh, interesting.
Up to that level.
Yeah.
So, you know, film in the real sense of the word is very unusual. You cannot put your finger on it. But once you see it, you know it.
Yeah. Okay. So, Pak Hassan and also the audience, if you do realize this is beyond 3 o'clock because we have actually agreed at the very last minute to extend this. And it's just interesting to have this opportunity for the both of us to be talking about this and for the audience as well to participate in. And thank you for those who have been posting your questions in the chat. And I actually have a very last question. It is reserved because now I want to open up, if you agree, Pak Hassan, if you don't have anything at the moment to say, open up to question and answers. Sure. And there is one question now from Dr. Azman Ayub. He's asking you, Pak Hassan, in your opinion, how far should historical facts be fantasized or bloated for dramatic or commercial purposes?
Okay, once you make a narrative film for the cinema, it is no longer factual. Even if you take it from history, from actual characters and so on. So you have to accept this fact. And this is why Hollywood is a master at this kind of thing. So then you decide with the writer, decides with the writer, what is it that we need to leave out? What is it that we need to add? Are there any characters that never existed before that we need to bring in? So how do you decide all this? Yeah. As I said, it comes from your own background, the kind of person that you are, the knowledge that you have, and so on. So the more knowledge you have, the more things that you have that you can bring into play. And sometimes it comes from your subconscious that you never thought about it and suddenly it just comes. Now that is true. Okay, so it actually depends on the subject matter also, and a lot depends on the producer. Like in the case of Mat Kilau, the producer, as we know, he was a former vice president of ISMA, an Islamic NGO, and of course he wants his druthers. So I was told that the first film that they made, the first time they shot the film, it was by the brother of the producer, and I'm also questioning how did this producer, who had never produced a film, and how did his brother, who has never directed, get the funds from FINAS to do it? So
it was funded by FINAS.
Yes, 1.8 million.
The first version.
No, I mean for the entire film. Okay. But when they requested for the money, how did they get it? So these are questions that the other side of the coin, and that has been plaguing the industry, and it will continue to do so when politicians are involved. So where were we just now?
How far should you? How far can you or should you go in terms of dramatizing historical facts when it comes to films?
Okay, let me quote Uwe again. He said that he took Joseph Conrad's novel, Almayer's Folly, and then he adapted it to make Hanyut. And he said that if I were to meet Joseph Conrad, I would say, thank you, Mr. Conrad. Now your story is my story. It's no more Joseph Conrad's story. So what he took from it was maybe the skeleton or maybe parts of it that fitted into what he actually wanted to say in his background story. So the film has got two stories, the foreground story and the background story. Yeah. Foreground is the story is what we are enjoying, but the background story is the real intent, the real story that the director wants to tell.
Yeah.
So for that, you have to be quite an unusual person. You have to be 10 steps ahead of your audience. But mostly our directors are one step only, or maybe one step behind.
Okay. Any questions? Anybody? Any more questions for Pak Hassan? Okay, there's one here, Pak Hassan, by Mat Burn. He's saying, taste and appreciation towards a film or should be subjective. But Pak Hassan mentioned with all the must-know knowledge like semiotics, film language, etc., is it a must for an audience to know all this instead of enjoying it as it is? Or all the audience need to be educated to watch a film?
So when I see a film, I'm not bringing semiotics and whatever into play. I'm just enjoying the film. Okay? But if I feel that there was something in the film and I needed to write about it, I will see it a second time to look at the details. Because otherwise, how can a person remember everything after seeing a 2-hour film only once? It's impossible. But it looks like in Malaysia, there are many, many geniuses, but I'm not one of them. So I had to see the second time. But the question is, does the audience need to know? No. The audience needs to feel. But if you are a film director worth your salt, you should have the knowledge, the film theories and whatever that you have studied. But once you start to structure everything and so on, all that starts to disappear. And what comes out will be the story and mostly the characters. So Robert McKee, the screenwriting guru, said, character is plot. But on the other hand, these people are creating a plot. That means this happens, a sequence of events that work, that happen one after another through cause and effect. Okay, that's what we learned at the very beginning. But after you are, making a lot of films, you shouldn't be following that rule anymore. It should be what goes on in the mind of the character is what will be driving the story. So it's just like us. Why do we make certain decisions in a certain manner? Especially when we are very angry, we start to lose our bearings, and then we do something that has a lot of negative repercussions. Yeah. So once we watch a movie, we see all this happening, and if it is strong enough, the audience will see themselves among the characters. So this is what André Bazin, the film philosopher, said in the 1940s. The cinema screen is like a window where we are spying upon the lives of others that reflects our own lives. And the famous Indonesian director, Teguh Karya, told me when I asked him, what is cinema to you? He said, I put you among the characters on the screen. If you can see yourself among the characters, I have succeeded. Yeah. Basically saying the same thing as André Bazin said.
Yes. I think this is true not just in films, Pak Hassan, but with all arts, that we can relate to the piece of art, particularly popular culture, in music as well. Lots of people got moved by the music of the Queen, for instance, Michael Jackson and etc. So I think it's not just confined to films. But we have here, sorry, Pak Hassan?
Your music, if you take classical music and you play to Mat Rempet, they'll probably throw their motorbikes at you. And if you take
probably they'll be going faster, Pak Hassan.
If you take rock music and you play it in Europe, there's going to be war between them and Malaysia. So you see, you have to be prepared. Okay, so that is why we have what we call set up in the first act of a film, where you introduce your characters, you introduce your subject, you introduce the theme of the film, and so on. That sets up the audience to receive what is going to happen, or that conflict and trials and tribulations of the hero. So you got to do it slowly. If you do it suddenly, then you're going to lose your audience. So there's a lot of things, and you cannot say, oh, you cannot do it like this, you cannot do it like that. If it works, it works. But of course, you really must have knowledge of film. Then you will appreciate what cinema is all about. And I would strongly advise students to see the classic films of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, when life hadn't changed as what it is now. So films like On the Waterfront, and there was one called the guy with the long nose, what's his name?
Pinocchio?
No, not Pinocchio. In the 1950s, then it was remade as Roxanne. Cyrano de Bergerac.
Okay, yeah.
Cyrano de Bergerac was based on a novel. But you can see how the hero is like the Penglipo Lara of ancient days, who regales people with his wonderful stories, but inside he is crying. Maybe he is crying for himself that he didn't achieve certain things, or he's crying for the people that we have seen that they cannot find a way out of the troubles that they are in. So you see, we put man's condition on the screen. All countries in the world are made up of humans facing the same problems. For instance, not like a Slumdog Millionaire, which was a fantasy where we think of what if someone from the slums managed to become a millionaire or achieve something. So it's still a fantasy. I don't think it has happened.
Yeah. Okay, we have a hand raised here, Pak Hassan. It's from Izzah Shahdi. Do you want to speak or perhaps show yourself? Izzah Shahdi?
Ya. Assalamualaikum Pak Hassan. Assalamualaikum Ibrahim. Okey, ada maaflah saya kena bahasa Melayu.
Tak apa.
Inggeris saya tak cukup bagus. Okey, ada satu persoalan yang selalu main kat saya. Katakanlah kita dah cukup bagus dalam hal penceritaan. Benda ni dah diprotekkan pada ketika zaman 50-an 60-an. Yeah. Orang Melayu memang bagus dalam bercerita. Yeah. Cuma yang isu yang saya nampak sekarang ni yang paling kuatnya adalah tentang modal. Kita membuat filem seumpama bermodalkan orang luar sana gunakan modal tu untuk buat drama. Jadi dia seperti orang kata apa, buy peanut you get peanut lah, kan? Jadi seharusnya dekat situ dah ada kekangan untuk kita nak berkarya sendiri. Malah pada satu tahap pula apabila saya tengok, katakanlah kita dah ada banyak duit, kita ada banyak modal. Hollywood saya perhatikan dah melalui permasalahan ini. Apabila kau ada segala kemudahan, segala kemewahan, tetapi akhirnya dia kecundang dalam penceritaan. Malah Korea dan filem Tamil dan Jepun sendiri penceritaan diorang lebih bagus daripada Hollywood. Itu yang terjadi macam filem terbaru yang tu apa semua. Jadi
soalannya Pak?
Jadi soalannya kita harus Malaysia, sinema Malaysia harus pergi ke mana dulu? Modalnya ke ataupun isinya, penceritaannya? Terima kasih.
Okey, terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Jadi nombor satu, kita tak boleh bandingkan industri kita dengan Hollywood, dengan Bollywood, dengan Korea. Diorang di sana dah memang ada industri filem. Kita belum ada lagi. So ibarat kita main bola, semua orang tendang bola tapi tak ada gol langsung. Itulah kita. Jadi ada sekumpulan yang tak mencari dana daripada Finas dan sebagainya. Dia orang cari dana sendiri kerana dia orang tak nak terkongkong dan dia nak buat juga dengan apa cara lah. Jadi adakah perlu duit dulu ke ataupun yang mana dulu tadi?
Cerita dulu.
Cerita dulu. Apapun bermula, dia begini, ada pelik sikit lah. Katalah producer tu ada duit. Dia kata, mai kita buat filem. Ni macam nak start Grand Sati lah ni. Jadi dia tak tahu apa benda. Lepas tu dia pun ambil lah seorang director. Dan director ni tak ada kerja. Dia pun kata, okey kita buat. Apa nak jadi. Tapi kalau seorang producer yang sebenar, dia tahu selok-belok pembikinan filem dan dia tahu macam mana nak jual filem dan segala-galanya yang berkaitan dengannya. Jadi inilah yang tidak terdapat. Producer sebenarnya di Malaysia, dia lepas tangan kadang-kadang ada director hijack. Ini banyak berlaku, banyak cerita kawan-kawan saya kena. Jadi producer dia terlibat dalam pemikiran. Kalau dia tak dapat terlibat, dia akan lantik seorang penerbit eksekutif yang menjadi perantara di antara dia dengan production itu sendiri. Dan dia seorang executive producer ni, dia boleh tengok skrin dan dia boleh soal director, mengapa engkau ambil shot ni? Tak ada dalam skrip. Itu betul. Tapi mana ada executive producer buat macam tu? Jadi director pula kadang-kadang dia ada skrip yang dia dah tulis dan dia nak jadikan ni, maka dia pun carilah producer. Dan kalau dia bernasib baik, adalah producer yang nak menerbitkan filem tu, dia nak keluarkan dana. Jadi dia both ways lah. Sebelah sini pun boleh, sebelah sini pun boleh. Tapi kalau kita ada industri yang sebenar, dia ada dia punya peraturan-peraturan dia yang kita kena ikut, dan kita kena, kalau kita nak hantar ke luar negara, nombor satu kita kena cari distributor dulu. Dan distributor tu akan ceritakan bahawa kalau nak tunjuk dekat Eropah, begini. Kalau nak tunjuk di Amerika, begini. Mungkin tajuk tu pun nak kena tukar dan sebagainya. Itulah cara kita menjual filem. Jadi banyak perkara yang terlibat.
Okay, so just to summarize in English, for those who don't understand Malay, lots of my students are also international. I would just like to sum up the question from Mr. Izzah Shadi there. The question to Pak Hassan was, for Malaysian filmmakers, what should come first? Is it the story or is it the money? And then Pak Hassan's reply, in a nutshell, was his view is that in Malaysia there is no proper film industry, so anything goes in Malaysia. It can come either way, money first, or you really have a story and then you go look for a producer who is really honest and really passionate about making films. But Pak Hassan did stress that a producer should get involved in the whole process of making, not just throwing out money. And if he can't, for whatever reason, is to find an executive producer as a mediator to represent himself. And Pak Hassan also mentioned that we can't equate the so-called Malaysian film industry with giants like Hollywood, because over there, everything is so structured. All processes are in place. So that was it. And Pak Hassan, I have one here, which is a bit blunt. I hope you are prepared for this, Pak Hassan. It's from Shah Zamin. I just hope that rather than writing, he could show himself and say it straight to your face, Pak Hassan. So what he wrote here is just written. It is clear Pak Hassan is politically biased in his analysis of Mat Kilau. As usual, Pak Hassan analyzes films in a patronizing way, ridiculing directors who do not share his liberal ideology. We have many self-hating netizens using the same narrative as Pak Hassan. Anything remotely related to Melayu, keindukan Melayu, conservatism is seen with immense hatred by the like of Pak Hassan. This is very disturbing. For the lack of a better word. Please be more objective in your analysis, Pak Hassan. Sorry, Pak Hassan, I'm just saying out, I'm just reading whatever's there.
I'm used to this. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, all I can say is, you had your opinion. It's your opinion. I have my opinion. I respect your opinion. You should respect my opinion. And you could have used better words. Okay? That shows that you have actually some knowledge in you, and you can articulate it intelligently. But you see, I have given a lot of quotations from social media and even academics, people like Faisal Tehrani and so on, who have said more or less the same thing that I've been saying. So what's the big deal?
Yeah. Okay. Right. Is there anything else? I'm looking again. Where is it? perhaps this could be a last one. Pak Hassan, before we end with what we have agreed on, Pak Hassan. There is a question here from Kai. I've seen Syamsul Yusof's session with Zaf on YouTube where Syamsul said that he doesn't use storyboards when making a movie. So what I want to know is whether storyboarding is important when making a film or is only a tool useful for a newbie director.
It depends on the filmmaker. If you want to use storyboard, you use storyboard. If you don't want, it doesn't matter. But at least you have a shooting script. So your shooting script is already detailed with the long shot, medium shot, close up, the camera tracking, and so on. So it's like a textual storyboard. You have to have something. But of course, there are directors who sometimes they only have a treatment. And once they come on set, they decide how they want to shoot the whole thing. But then, of course, you will have a problem because if at certain places you want to have like a drone shot and so on, and you don't have a drone, so there's going to be a problem. So whatever it is, it has to be planned out in detail before you go out to shoot. Otherwise, your crew cannot do the job for you. Yeah. And in animation, of course, definitely you have to have a storyboard. And I would recommend first-time filmmakers to completely storyboard. It doesn't matter if you change later, but at least you have something and you won't make a mistake, and then you come back and then you find out, wow, cannot edit because there are scenes missing. You forgot to take. Then you go.
Okay.
No problem.
All right. Okay, although I said one last one, that one just now, but because this is a raised hand, this is the last one before we go back to us. Okay, Pak Hassan, are you okay with that? So I hope this is short and quick. So Sing It Home, you want to speak? Perhaps you want to show yourself? Go ahead. Sing It Home. All right, no response. Okay, then Pak Hassan. With the success of Mat Kilau, there's also been calls to make films with patriotic themes. Is this something positive, Pak Hassan? And is this something encouraging for the students who are studying films, like graduates and those who are already in the industry?
Okay. So I think these people who are making all these statements are missing the wood for the trees. We should make good films, not the so-called patriotic films. There's no genre of patriotic films, only films with patriotic themes. Okay, if it's done well, it will move the audience. So this is where the filmmaker has got to have the necessary knowledge with which you can structure visuals and understand how the camera is being used to tell the story and so on. I'm sad to say that many directors don't understand the camera, so they leave it to the cinematographer. And the cinematographer, sorry to say, we have cinematographers and suddenly we find that they are directors of photography, but they don't understand the visual representation. Okay, how to take a shot that actually is meaningful, not just beautiful. So we see beautiful cinematography, but the meaningful cinematography I see very seldom, only in a few directors. Okay, so if they are looking at Mat Kilau as a good example of a film because it became a huge box office hit, I'm afraid we are all going on the wrong track. A social media commentator said that Mat Kilau is only a gangster movie. So you can see that so many people have what to say. So anyway, if a film is being used specifically for a purpose like uniting the Malays and so on, you must remember there are 3 criteria for a good film. The first one is it must entertain. Number 2, it has something to say about society, about the people, and then it reflects the culture of that particular group of people. But the problem with Mat Kilau is the number 2 has become number 1. It has something to say. It's a propaganda film. Okay? No question about it. So you have all this yelling of unity slogans, Islamic slogans, and whatever. That's not film. That's why I say you can dub it as a funfair movie. Very noisy, fast moving, shaky cameras, and the noise is so loud. That's not film. So it's a problem. If you say you want to make films, more patriotic films, and then you're pointing to Mat Kilau as a good example. In terms of the economics, yes, it made a lot of money, never had been done before. But if you want to talk about Mat Kilau being phenomenal, I would say that the film, The Journey, was phenomenal because they had no known actors. Nobody had heard of the old man, the main character of the story. And it made about 16 or 18 million ringgit. And until today, they're still trying to figure out how did this film make film. Mat Kilau is very clear. There's a lot of action and so on, and people go for that.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Hassan. Just one more before we end, because I noticed that we were calling for Sing It Home just now, but it's written there saying, "Hi, I'm Hatta." Is it Prof. Hatta? Or is some other Hatta? But anyway, the question there is, just want to ask Pak Hassan opinion if awards like Razzie Award exist in Malaysia. Will our industry get better? Thanks.
What award?
Razzie Award.
What is it?
RAZZIE.
First time I'm hearing.
I am not sure myself. Okay.
Razzie Award?
Yeah.
Anyway, we don't go around making films for awards. We just make films.
Oh, awards for bad movies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there is the Rotten Tomatoes.
No, in Malaysia, is there?
Oh, in Malaysia.
If we have that kind of awards in Malaysia, will the industry get better?
No. That's I think to me is being negative. Just like all these loudmouth video bloggers who are actually killing the industry. Okay, because I was told, somebody posted to me. He said because of this guy's negative review, someone said, "Okay, I'm not going to see this film." That's bad. I would say, even if I personally don't like a film, I will not say, don't go to see it. I would say, go and see it. This is my opinion. You may have a different opinion. And I remember the late Dr. Anwar Noarai was my mentor. A friend, a good friend of ours, he was quite confused. He was a filmmaker himself. He said, there are two people, both of them understand film, and they are respected, but both of them saw the same film. One of them said it's bad, the other one said it's good. So he was very confused. He said you can't make anything right. He asked Dr. Anwar Noarai, which one is the one who is correct? And Dr. Anwar Noarai said one of them knows more than the other person. But
which one?
Which one? So even among people who are already experts, you have a problem. What more? Now, I remember Pauline Kael, the very famous film critic for New York Times. She condemned The Sound of Music when it came out. And she got so many brickbats until she had to speak out and say, actually, when I saw it, I was having a fever, so maybe that affected me. What do you say?
Yeah. Okay, Cik Hassan, we only have 5 minutes left. Any closing points, or you want to sum up?
Yeah, I would strongly recommend students to watch The Lion King, The Gladiator, Braveheart, and Road to Perdition. They have very strong storytelling structure, which is based on Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, which is consonant with our journey through life. and that's why it's found in mythologies and legends. So watch and analyze. And in particular, The Lion King, which is based on Shakespeare's Hamlet. As I was saying, or the cinematic representation, the film theme is destiny. That Simba is destined to be the next Lion King, but he runs away. Now, how is destiny presented visually? In the form of stars in the sky, at the beginning, in the middle, at the end. So there is a visual rhythm to that. Now, there is astrology is behind it. So we look at the stars to check out your own destiny in the form of Cancer, Leo, and so on. And we see this being applied in the film. When Simba is small, his father takes him out and he says, look at all those things in the sky. These are the souls of dead kings who are looking down upon us and guiding the next Lion King. But of course, he's small and he doesn't understand it. And it's done in a long shot. So you see, the visual representation is not just in the stars, but also in the shot size, which is a long shot. That means Simba doesn't understand it. Now, in the middle of the film, Simba and his two friends are lying on the grass after a hearty meal, and they are looking at the sky. And now we see again the stars. And then Timon, it's Pumbaa who asks, what are those things up there? Or is it Timon? And then Pumbaa says, he gives the scientific explanation. It's a lot of gas floating in the air, blah, 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 and so on. And of course, Timon makes a wisecrack about that, and they all laugh. But when Simba is being asked, the thing that was in his subconscious mind starts to trouble him, and he doesn't know how to reply. And then he goes off on his own, and that becomes the inciting incident for the next part of the film. At the end of the film, now he understands that he needs to go back, but the psychological aspect is still in him. He has got to overcome it. And so Rafiki, who christened him or baptized him or whatever, took him into the underworld to meet with the soul of the dead king, because that's the only way. The king is the only way. His father is the only one who can motivate him to go back and reclaim his throne. And then we see the father's shape as Leo in astrology. Okay, and he says, Simba, you have forgotten your destiny. And then, of course, Simba is now almost at the threshold of going back, but he needs one last one. And that's where Rafiki hits him on the head. Oh, that pain is in the past. And so he runs off and reclaims his throne. So you can see all these elements is structured in such a way that you have the narrative, then you have the visual narrative. The visual also speaking to the audience. You have to master this. And these are the films that can help you do it.
Yeah. Okay, Cik Hassan, thank you again. I think in a nutshell, what I can summarize from this session is that filmmakers must have some sort of knowledge to communicate their work in film. The audience, they don't need to know such extent, but no, this is my opinion. I believe that any great artist, it comes, they do apply it, but with any great artworks, film included, the audience, as you said, Pak Hassan, will be able to feel it. Because art is nothing if it doesn't make you feel. And since film is storytelling through moving images, visuals that move with sound, I believe subconsciously they will be able to pick it up, although they don't know film language. That's my opinion, Pak Hassan. So, thank you again, Pak Hassan. Hope to have more sessions with you. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you, Pak Hassan. Assalamualaikum. And also thank you to everybody as well, from within Taylors and outside of Taylors who have participated. I am so sorry if I couldn't attend to all questions and messages. It's simply difficult to handle everything on my own. It's a one-man studio here, Pak Hassan. Okay. Thank you very much, Pak Hassan. Okay, speak to you soon, Pak Hassan. Okay, thank you everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.